So SPC flooring, it's got origins that date back to probably 1890s something or other, I think was the date, when PVC, which is
polyvinyl chloride.
Well done. Was invented by accident by a scientist, and they really didn't know what to do with it. Then around about the 1930s, they came up with a use for vinyl flooring. Then vinyl flooring sort of went dead because the product itself wasn't available because of the war. And then eventually around about the 1970s, we started to get these lovely, lovely products. And I think you'll agree it was an absolute gem of a product. I think people remember them. They were these little tiles that you peel and stick and you stuck them to the floor. But that is the very, very first type of vinyl flooring that was available commercially. It moved through to linoleum, marmoleum, PVC flooring, and eventually we ended up with something like this, which was the basis of LVT plank flooring, which came about round about in the 1980s. The trouble was then they discovered that there was asbestos in the actual product, and it was nearly banned from production. So PVC flooring was really saved and then died and then has come back again. So the moral to the story is if you're lifting up floors from the 1980s, you need to do a survey to make sure there's no asbestos within that product before you uplift and dispose of it. So yeah, we've come a long way. So this was project 1, if you like. This is project 2. And now we've come to what we call SPC, which is Stone Plastic Composite flooring. So it's still vinyl, it's still got PVC in it, but it's mixed with calcium carbonate. And the quality of your board depends on your mix that comes together. And we'll discuss that a little bit later on. So how it's made is several layers. You've got a sample in front of you or on your seats. On the very top is something you can't see. It's called an anti-scratch UV coating. Very important for the South African market because we've got UV rays like no other country in the world. UV rays will kill pretty much any type of flooring. So your UV anti-scratch coating is a very, very important factor. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, but it's like having a pair of sunglasses on your flooring.
And we all know good quality sunglasses versus poor quality sunglasses. And this is also quite a discerning point that while there is product out there and there is other product out there, like you don't necessarily know what you're missing if you can't physically see it. But I implore you, when you're receiving your samples from the various suppliers, take a key and go and scratch across it. Compare a couple of different brands together and you'll very quickly be aware of the difference.
Okay, so then you've got your wear layer. Again, you can't see it, you can't touch it, you can not necessarily know it's there, but your wear layer is what protects the floor from the feet that are walking on top of it. In South Africa, you get a wear layer from a 0.3 millimeter up to a 0.7, but a 0.3 and a 0.5, 0.55 is probably the norm in the industry. There's guys in between, but from air perspective, 0.3 is your domestic product going up to a light commercial, but I find a light commercial spec to be very, very vague. Light commercial can be a doctor's waiting rooms in private practice where he maybe sees 10, 15 patients a day. But if you go into the public clinics where they're going to see 100 people a day, that is not considered to be a light commercial. So when you're specifying a 0.3 wear layer, make sure that you're specifying it for the right area. My personal belief is 0.3 domestic. Let's leave the commercial to a 0.5. So 0.5, 0.55 is your commercial wear layer, and that should give you a warranty of up to 15, maybe even 20 years in a commercial environment, depending on the quality of the actual wear layer itself. The decor paper, that is what you can see through the things that you can't see. In other words, it's a picture of the product. In this instance, you're looking at a wood grain. If you go outside, you'll see stone look. You can have pretty much anything imaginable printed onto your LVT or SPC flooring, provided the volume is there. We've just done a job now of 6,500 squares where we've basically done a copy of a product for someone's specification. So if the volume is there and your imagination wants to go there, then we can actually have that product produced for you. It takes a little bit of a while, but it can be done. And this is probably the most important part, your core board. This is what we were saying is your PVC,
vinyl chloride,
mixed with, good man,
calcium carbonate.
Calcium carbonate.
Or otherwise chalk.
Exactly. Chalk doesn't seem very hard, but when mixed with PVC, it becomes a very, very stable product. The differences in quality is dependent on the quality of your raw materials and the quantities. The higher the calcium carbonate, the more brittle the board is going to be and the more chance you've got of failure. So I do this gingerly. A good quality SPC vinyl should be flexible. In other words, you should be able to do that with it.
And this is a key important area when, like, we're going to get into it. That flexibility is absolutely paramount when you have slight undulations in your substrate, in your joint structure, that it doesn't crack when there is a little bit of movement. So if you add too much chalk, it gets brittle. So when you have that little bit of extra weight or the slight undulation, the joint structure will actually shear. You get what we call vertical shear, and then we start having a whole host of problems.
So I think you can see that that's probably the key point, as Barry was saying. If you've got it too hard, then the joints are going to snap, the board's going to snap, it's not going to last the lifetime that we want it to last. And then finally on the back you'll find that there's an underlay. That is the only thing you must put underneath an SPC. You must not put any combi-lays, underlays or anything else other than plastic sheeting, which we'll come to in just a second. That is there to take up minor lumps and bumps in the subfloor. It's there to suppress sound. So if you're in a multi-story building, you don't want to walk on the floor and someone down below hears you stomping around on the floor. That's the most annoying thing in the world, in my opinion. So that's there to suppress sound, to also reduce sound reflected into the room, and to take up your minor lumps and bumps in the room.
Also, if you've got a little bit of like grit, which obviously the installer should be vacuuming and sweeping away, but a hard surface onto a hard surface, it's going to sound quite crispy. So that's just a little buffer in between. So you've got to understand and respect that a good quality SPC generally has an IXPE underlay, and some of the other options have slightly cheaper underlays which have no memory. So once you've actually compressed it, it doesn't actually bounce back when you remove that weight. And that becomes a quite integral component when you're exploring these products. And that's where you get that price variance. And so you say, well, this is the same plank, same thickness. I don't understand where that price variance comes in. That's where you start losing or gaining.
Okay, so that's basically what it's made of. I think we need to look at the properties that are contained within the product. SPC has been sold as a waterproof flooring system. Technically speaking, it is water resistant to about 99.9% from the top. But from the bottom, it is not waterproof flooring. Moisture can affect the floor and can cause the floor to break down over a long period of time. So when we said there's nothing else that needs to go underneath the floor, we recommend a moisture barrier of some description, be it a liquid of two-part poly, that's the one. A plastic sheeting, we personally as manufacturers recommend an 80 micron LDPE, low density polyethylene plastic, virgin material, but you can use the 200 micron HDPE, which is?
High density.
You listened last time, I'm impressed. So there's two options. The thinner you go with the plastic, the more chance you've got of it breaking down if there is a moisture problem under the floor. But what the moisture does, if it's left to eat into the calcium carbonate, it basically breaks down the joint and your floor will fail probably over a period of 15 months to 2 years. And it's something that we never do in the industry is check for moisture on an SPC product. On your stick down LVT vinyls, there's a clear parameter of moisture must be below 3% before you can do a glue down vinyl. But SPC, everyone saw it as the wonder product and thought, you know what, let's just throw it down on anything. And that's what they did. And moisture came back and broke the board basically. Fortunately, it wasn't their product, but the whole industry has now stipulated that you must put plastic underneath or a moisture barrier on an SPC floor.
Also, when you've got a slight variance in the pH of the concrete, you know, we don't know the variabilities, or the installer is not necessarily always testing the pH of that substrate. And that can, over a period of time, really impact the calcium carbonate composition. And so that damp-proof membrane really just safeguards the product. The long-term vapor emission from a slab, which, as we know, some slabs can never dry out or take 100 years. And so we need to put these cautionary measures in place. And plastic, it's cheap, it's inexpensive, but it is essential.